Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's Stories. We now return to America is in the Heart, a Personal History by Carlos Bulosan. Part 1, Chapter 10. I had written to Luciano that I was coming home, but he was not at the station in Binalonan when I arrived. I put my suitcase on my back and walked in the darkness, watching the flickering lamps in the houses on both sides of the street. It was a time of religious festival, and there were many peasants in the street on their way to church. They wore homespun clothes and rough wooden sandals, and there were townspeople in the crowd who wore leather slippers and shoes and cotton suits. The more fortunate ones rode in decorated karomatas. The more fortunate ones rode in decorated karomatas with their perfumed daughters and sleek-haired sons. The peasants moved carefully out of their way. If the man in the karomata were an important personage or a government official of rank, the driver would lash at the peasants or spit on them. The important passengers would merely show his face in the window, and everything would be forgiven and forgotten. I was surprised to find our house in total darkness. When I saw that it was empty, I felt desolated. I stood at the gate for a long time trying to decide what to do. Several of our neighbors passed by with their carabaos and other beasts of burden and called my name, but I did not answer them because I lacked the courage to say anything. Slowly, I climbed into the house and fumbled under the earthen stove for matches. When I found the little box, I went into the living room and struck a match. The tiny yellow flame flared up and lingered in the small cup of my hand. Mice scampered into their holes, and house lizards fell from the roof, turning over and over on their scaly sides. Then I saw the oil lamp on the rack at the edge of the table and lit it. I took the lighted lamp and went to the kitchen. The pots were all clean and in order. The rice bin in the corner was empty. The plates were clean, and the earthen drinking jars were full. There was firewood by the stove, and the salt tube above it, stuck in the grass roof, was full and leaking where the rain had touched it. Hanging on a rope above the stove was a leg of lamb. I was relieved to find something to eat because I had not eaten since I had left Baguio. I went to the wall where we kept our sharp bolos. The rack was still there, but the bolos were gone. I began to wonder what had become of my family. Had they come upon a fortune? Had they recovered the land? Had they gone to the village? I cut a piece of meat and chopped it into little pieces, spraying vinegar and chopped pepper on the meat. I started to eat the hard rice crinkle I found in the bottom of one of the pots. The food warmed my stomach and my heart. I was in my own house. I washed my hands and took off my clothes. I spread the grass mat on the bamboo floor and tried to sleep, but the mice kept coming out of their holes and running about the house. I was thinking of going to the village when the bells in the church tower began pealing, and people from everywhere started shouting. I could hear the resounding roar of pagbayoan, or threshing boxes. When the spreading clamor reached our neighborhood, I could see people rushing into the street and children waving palm leaves and screaming. I went outside and ran to the street where the crowd was thick and noisy. I rushed into the crowd and mingled with the people, milling madly up and down the street. Then I heard them shouting, "Happy New Year! Happy New Year!" I pushed my way deeper into the crowd, shouting and laughing aloud when I accidentally ruffled the dignity of a shy village girl. "Happy New Year!" I shouted at the top of my voice. Happy New Year! I pushed and moved slowly with the crowd. I kicked the ground like a little boy again, remembering other years that were not like this one. Happy New Year, Alos, I said to myself. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my neck. I turned around and saw Luciano waving a palm leaf in his hand. This is a miracle, he shouted above the noise. I did not know you were in town. When did you arrive? A few hours ago, I said, beginning to feel the miracle of the new year. Since when did you start celebrating like this? This is the first time, Alos, said my brother, putting his arm around me and shouting, Happy New Year! Happy New Year! I cupped my hands to my mouth. What year is it? I shouted into my brother's ear. It is the year of the Lord, he shouted back. You must remember this year because it is significant. It is the year of all years. In the United States, it is said, it is the sad end of another depression year and the beginning of a sadder one. Happy New Year! Happy New Year, Alos! When 1 o'clock came, the celebrants circled the plaza and crowded into the Presidencia. The noise suddenly ceased, and the people started for home. One by one, lamps in the houses went out, and the policemen barred the door of the Presidencia. My brother and I walked in the street, suddenly exhausted. Where is your suitcase? He asked. I have it in the house, I said. House? He said. That house was sold months ago. I did not know that, I said. Father sold it because he had the chance to buy a small piece of land in Mangusmana, said my brother. Mother and the 2 girls are there with him. I have heard that Mother is doing most of the work. Father is very sick. I must see them at once, I said. It was unbearable to think that my mother was now doing the farm work and my 2 little sisters. How were they going to grow up now? We went to our former house and picked up my suitcase. Then we proceeded to Luciano's house where, greatly disturbed by the thoughts of my mother, I got up from my mat at dawn and walked to Mangusmana through the wet rice fields. It was only when I was nearing our village that I remembered my brother Leon. He had come back from a war about which he had never spoken, and then had gone away again with his wife to start a new life. I was not coming from a war, but it was my first homecoming, home to the village and our grass hut, home to years of hard labor and bitter memories. And the grass was taller than usual. The water in the ditch was sweeter. The mango trees by the footpath were greener and the meadow larks more melodious. There was a sweet feeling of homecoming in me. Then I saw my mother's familiar back. She was following the plow, her skirt tucked between her legs. Suddenly, I knew what Leon had felt the day he came home, running suddenly to take the plow from my father. I started running across the fields and leaping over ditches, shouting and calling frantically, Mother! 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 My mother stopped the carabao and looked toward me. The sun was falling directly upon her face, and she raised her hand to protect her eyes from the strong morning light. When she recognized me, she tied the rope to the handle of the plow, as my father used to do, and waited for me. Have you come home, son? She said, and that was all she could say. Her mouth began to tremble with joy and sorrow because to her, joy and sorrow were always one and the same. Suddenly, she grabbed me affectionately and wept, murmuring, We are poor people, son. We are very poor people, son. I brushed back the tears from my eyes. I tried to laugh in order not to cry. Gently, I pushed my mother out of the way and took the rope from her. Go home, mother, I said. I will finish this piece for you. Don't work the animal too hard, she said. I won't, I said. I watched her go away. a little peasant woman who carried the world on her shoulders. Then I flipped the rope gently across the carabao's back, and the animal moved obediently and expertly along the deep furrows. The sun came up slowly and burnished the upturned earth, felling the sweet dew in the grass and rousing the birds in their nests. I could hear dogs barking in the houses nearby and the roar of water rushing through the tall talahib grass and rolling over the flat, fine sand in the river. I unhitched the carabao and tied it to a peg with a long maguey rope so that it could reach the shade of the tamarind and the water in the ditch. I covered the plow with grass and started for our hut. My father was lying in a corner in the kitchen, coughing violently and shivering whenever the draft reached him. His body had shrunken and his teeth had fallen out. He ate only soup and lugao, or soft-boiled rice. He could no longer stand up, even to get a cup of water, but my sister Francisca attended to his needs. She was only 6 years old, but she knew what to do around the house. I knew that she would grow up into a fine peasant girl. I was home with my family, and this alone was a comforting feeling. I had come back to manhood. Here in my native village, I had come back to myself and my roots, here in this narrow strip of land. Back to my soil and to my father's faith. I had not forgotten him limping through Mangusmana on his sore feet, going from house to house and asking the farmers if they could lend him a piece of land to cultivate or could hire him. I had not forgotten his love for the earth, where his parents and their parents before him had lacerated their lives, digging away the stones and trees to make the forest land of our village a fragrant and livable place. While we were planting rice seedlings, one of my cousins came to our house and invited me to go to a dance in a nearby village. We wrapped our clothes with banana leaves and walked through the rain and mud, shouting our manhood into the night. We found a well near a banana grove where we washed our feet. My cousin was a high school student in Vigan, a large city in the province of Ilocos Sur. He had a good pair of shoes and his alpaca suit was new and smoothly pressed. He wore a red tie and striped silk shirt. My feet were still as bare as when I was born, but Luciano had given me an old khaki suit. I put a bandana around my neck and the girls thought that it was better than a necktie. I noticed a girl who had fallen for my cousin. I saw him kiss her on the mouth, a thing which was very daring in those days. The old man looked at them with great anticipation, but the women frowned with scorn. The girls snickered in their corners, sticking out their little yellow tongues behind outspread fans. The little girls and boys around the dance floor drummed on their bloated bellies. Sometimes they danced among themselves and attracted much attention from the crowd with their naked bodies and ugly spreading toes, spitting as they jumped to the wild music, their spittle falling on their naked loins. I was too shy to dance, so I hung about the pavilion. "Approach a girl you like and stand before her if you are afraid to talk," said my cousin. "Do you think it will work?" I asked. "It always works with these shy peasant girls," he said. "Watch me do it." He saw a rather good-looking girl in a red dress. He strode across like a peacock and stood in front of her. I was watching her mouth to see if she would say something to him, but she almost jumped into his arms. My cousin turned around and winked at me. I saw a girl I liked sitting on the bench near the door at the far end of the dance floor. I circled the people and stood in front of her. The girl flung herself into my arms and I was taken by surprise, and for a while I could not move my legs. Then we were holding each other innocently and dancing the way it should not have been done in the village. I could see the sensual stare of the men and the anger of the women. The children spread out along the walls, sticking out their tongues and giggling. When you dance for the first time, the world is like a cradle upon the biggest ocean in the universe. There are no other sounds except the beating of your hearts. And when the wild blaring of the trumpet and the savage boom boom of the drum bring you back to reality, you get scared and begin to misstep and falter. Your hands weaken their hold on the rapturous being near you, and you want to apologize to her, but the words are stuck in your throat. Suddenly, you become conscious of the staring people around you, appraising you with obscene eyes and lascivious tongues. And slowly you lead the beauteous creature in your arms back to her seat. Then the orchestra becomes a symbol of crashing noises, meaningless and riotous, and you return to your corner trembling with cold and sudden fear. You are pushed back to reality, to the world of puny men and women who are circumscribed by fear. Then you, too, are among them, and one of them, prisoned by their fears and the ugliness of their lives. You go to the window and lean far out, savoring the bitter taste on your tongue. The next morning, my cousin came running to the field where I was planting rice. "Let us go away at once, Alos," he said. "I think I will stay until the rice is all planted," I said, "and I would like to help my mother with the crop. I am sorry I cannot go with you." "You don't understand what I mean," he said. "Remember those two girls we danced with last night? Well, they are sisters. They are in the village now looking for us. I think they would like to force us into marriage." I laughed because it seemed incredible. "It is no laughing matter," my cousin said. "Well, what have we done?" I asked. "We danced, that is all," he said. "But you'd better come with me to Lingayen if you don't want to be married to a mud-smelling peasant girl. I will go to school there instead of vegan, but I am on my way to town now. Hurry, Alos!" "I will think it over," I said. My cousin started running toward Binalonan, looking back and shouting to me to follow him. I waved at him innocently and went back to my work. But when I went home in the afternoon, Francisca met me at the door. "Mother said for you to go away for a while," she said, giving me a bundle and a basket of vegetables. I thought it was all very foolish, but when I reached the ladder, the heads of the two village girls became visible. They were talking to my mother. My father was coughing violently. I could see Marcela playing with the girl near the stove. I took the bundle from Francisca and ran for the gate. Only when I reached the rice fields did I begin to feel free. I wanted to stay in town for a week, but 10 days afterward, when I returned to Mangusmana, the rice seedlings were already planted. My mother told me that I could go. I went to Binalonan and stayed with Luciano. When my cousin set out for Lingayen in an ox cart, I decided to go with him. I had saved a little money in Baguio, but it was not enough to take me to America. With Lingayen's fishing industry in mind, I went with my cousin. But the cow was very small and lazy, and it was 3 days before we arrived in Lingayen. Chapter 11. It was the second week of June, and the students were coming back to Lingayen. They came by ox cart with their provisions of rice and assorted vegetables, bringing with them members of their families or close relatives to do their cooking and laundry. When they could not make this arrangement, the poorer students did their own cooking after school hours and their washing on Saturdays. They went to church on Sundays. Those who had a little money came by karomata, their rough wooden trunks and rattan suitcases piled on top of the flimsy vehicle. The horses looked like fleas about to be thrown into the sky by the weight of their burdens. The students who lived in the neighboring towns consigned their belongings to their more fortunate friends, and came on foot. They could be seen on the highway waving their hands eagerly when an automobile or a bus came by. The students filled the little houses of the fishermen on the shore of Lingayen Gulf. Even the 3 chapels were converted into boarding houses. For while the students were devoted Catholics and went to church regularly, they could not always afford to buy a candle or contribute to the church fund. The chapels depended only on the fishermen, who had houses and took in boarders. But the donations from these frugal men were not enough to sustain the buildings. As soon as we arrived in Lingayen, my cousin told me to stay at his boarding house. The owner of the building was a fisherman who owned 2 fishing boats. He was in need of men, and he asked me if I wanted to work with him. I was glad because I could earn a little money while away from home. My cousin lived with 14 boys attending high school, but the house was too small for all of us. The toilet was connected with the house by a narrow bamboo footbridge that hung on 2 abaca ropes. The kitchen was a hive of activities. There was a cook, an elderly peasant woman, and a young girl who did the washing. They were always going in and out of the house, throwing the bucket into the well in the yard and shouting with friendliness to the other women in the neighborhood. At mealtime, the girls next door, 15 of them in a house like ours, came to the long table in our dining room wearing their heavily starched cotton dresses. As soon as we were through eating, some of the more considerate girls stayed to help the cook with the dishes. Sometimes they stayed to discuss their schoolwork with the boys, but the others returned to their rooms to sing or sew. All of them came from peasant families in other towns. There was a town ordinance forbidding students of opposite sexes to live in the same house. It had been prompted by the birth of illegitimate children some years before. Since only students were specified in the ordinance, I was free to go into the house of the girls. When another student moved into our house, the landlady found a small corner for me in the girls' house. I used to wake up at dawn to go to work. I walked between small nipa houses, and when I arrived at our meeting place, my companions were already waiting for me. When our crew was completed and we were ready to put out to sea, the man on the prow of the boat blew a horn. We climbed into the boat with our meager lunch of rice and salted fish and started rowing seaward. It was wonderful to work with men who knew the sea. They knew nothing of books, but they could tell what kind of tuna was running a mile away. They stood in the boat and put their hands over their eyes. Then they knew whether it was a school of lobster or white fish. They wasted no motion of their sea-brown bodies. When they spoke, it was full of wisdom. And from them I learned the different edible weeds and grasses in the sea. We cast our end of the long net about 3 miles away from land, and the men in the other boat cast theirs. Then we started rowing slowly away from each other until the net was stretched taut. Another blast of the horn, deep and challenging and meaningful to men of the sea, and then we started rowing toward the shore, toward the day's end. The process was slow because we had to be careful with the net. It would be about 3 in the afternoon when our boats reached the shore. Putting small yokes about our bodies, we would start pulling in the long nets and singing, "Sinta! Sinta! Sinta!" Slowly and rhythmically, our legs moved in the sand, on and on, until the children in the grass houses near came by to the shore and started singing with us. "Sinta! Sinta! Sinta!" They would begin pulling the rope with us and singing at the top of their voices. After 2 long hours of slow pulling, the catch would be drawn to the shore. We could see the fish desperately swimming in circles, crashing against the net and bouncing back into the water. When we were ready to land the catch, the children would release the rope and run to the center of the net. The fish would leap tirelessly until they were heavy with sand. Then the owner of the boat would see to it that every man had his due share. Even the children who had done a little pulling had something. The fish buyers were waiting with their carts to buy our catch. Then I would be on my way home, stopping at the school ground and watching the students playing and singing. I would try to single out my cousin, but there were over 10,000 boys and girls in the yard. I would proceed to my boarding house, where my landlady was waiting for me. Not long afterward, my cousin asked me to go to school with him, since the fishing season was over and there would be no work for 3 months. I eagerly consented to his suggestion. It was an experience to be with my cousin in his classes, but it was tiresome to sit in one place for 40 minutes, the time allowed for each subject. The boys, thinking me a regular student, would start talking to me in English. I saw some of the girls glancing at my long hair and bare feet with pitying eyes. My cousin's English teacher was a man who had been in America. He wore American shoes and clothes and came to class smoking a large pipe. He sat on a small chair which he tilted backward, putting his feet on the table so that we could see his silk socks. The timid girls in the front seats were embarrassed, but he took an interest in me and even invited me to his house. There, he wrote out a credit card which made it appear that I had been going to school regularly for 2 years, graduating from one grade to another with excellent marks. "These fat sons and soft daughters of the sons of bitches think they are smart," he used to say to me, referring to the children of the crooked politicians and land grabbers in Pangasinan. The girls come to my class to show me their pretty little rumps, as if they could buy me with that. I will show them! I did not understand him at times, but I was learning rapidly about the Philippine middle classes. It seemed that he had gone to America as a boy, had worked as a houseboy, and in 15 years had finished his course. His parents were poor peasants. They had died by the time he returned to the Philippines. This misfortune had made him bitter and confused. Instead of using his experience as an inspiring example to other peasant children, he had turned inward and used it as a weapon of revenge. He had turned against the hacienderos or land gentry and finally against his own class and heritage. But he was kind and considerate to me. When a general intelligence test was given to all the students, he gave me a copy of the examination paper in advance. I studied the questions and found the answers in my cousin's books. I took the examination along with the rest, but only for fun. I was playing baseball with the girls in the vacant lot between our houses when my cousin came running to me. He grabbed the bat from my hand, gasping for breath. "You have the highest score in the entire school, Alos," he said excitedly. "And you have the highest score throughout the province of Pangasinan. Perhaps you have the highest score in the Philippines. You know, we have the same examination papers throughout the islands." I felt guilty and ashamed. The girls dropped their gloves and came running to me. Their eyes shone with envy. They trembled with love. When my cousin read them their marks, which he had copied on a slip of paper, they slunk away like cats and did not come out of their rooms for a long time. Those who had fair grades joked with the landlady and the cook, but they refused to talk to me. There were 130 questions and I had correctly answered 127 in 30 minutes. The students had been given 1 hour, but I had finished my paper 30 minutes ahead of time. It had been so stated by the examiner on my paper. My fame spread far and wide. I saw my teacher regularly and we had fun laughing at the joke that we played upon the school. Then he urged me to study seriously. The girls from other houses began coming to my boarding house with their lessons, bringing neatly embroidered handkerchiefs. They came after school and filled the house with the smell of their powder and cheap perfume. They washed my shirts and helped the cook with the dishes. My landlady began to look on me as someone miraculous. I had become a valuable asset to her business. But my fame had become a nuisance. When the fishing season came again, I felt a great relief. I stayed away until dark, hoping that no one would be waiting for me. I noticed that one girl was always in the kitchen with one of the boys when I came home. This girl, Veronica, had evidenced a great dislike for me. I had never paid any attention to her, but I could see that she wanted to hurt me. One night I had gone to the Presidencia to send money to my mother. I returned to my boarding house eating peanuts and looking up at the bright stars in the sky. As I drew near the school, I heard the dogs barking excitedly. I stopped and listened. Then I heard the pathetic wail of a baby. I could not believe my ears. I picked up a stone and chased the dogs away. I found the baby lying on the grass. It was so small. I picked it up carefully and carried it into the house. I woke up my landlady and showed her the baby. "Where did you get it?" she asked, trembling with sudden fear. "I found it on the grass in the schoolyard," I said. "The dogs were barking over it. I was lucky to come along because they might have killed it." "In the schoolyard, did you say?" she asked. "Yes," I said. The woman collapsed. When she came to, the boys were already awake. They surrounded her, rubbing her eyes and looking at the baby with surprise. My landlady cried out, "My business is ruined! My business is ruined!" When I went to my room, I saw a faint light in the kitchen. I walked on tiptoe and peeped through the door. Veronica was burning some clothes in the stove. She became angry when she saw me. "What are you doing?" I asked, going into the kitchen and looking at the burning clothes. "Go away!" she screamed. "Go away, or I will kill you!" I saw the blood on her feet and on the floor near the stove. I went into my room and tried to sleep, pushing away the face of the little baby when it came to my mind. I could still hear the excited voices of the boys in the other house. Then the roosters started crowing, and the fishermen came out of their houses with their lunch boxes. It was time for me to go with them. I felt my way in the dark and climbed down the ladder. When I came home in the afternoon, there was a large crowd near the house. I saw 2 policemen at the door and 2 others in the house. My landlady came running to me with my suitcase. "Don't go into the house, Alos," she said, putting the suitcase in my hand. "There is going to be trouble with that girl. Go!" "I did not do anything," I said weakly. "Go away from here, son," she insisted. "Go anywhere. Don't stay another minute in Lingayen. You are a good boy, and I'd hate to see you in trouble. Go!" I walked away from her and took the first bus to Binalonan. It was foolish of my landlady to think that I had any part in the birth of the baby. I looked at the perfect credit cards that my teacher had given me. I thought of my cousin and sighed. I leaned far out the window and looked at the twinkling stars in the sky. I was nearing the dark land of home. Chapter 12. It was 10 o'clock in the morning when I reached Binalonan. I went to the Presidencia and asked the postmaster if he had seen my brother Luciano. The policeman told me that he had not been around for a long time. I carried my suitcase to his house. I saw a young woman looking out of one of the windows. She was holding a crying baby. Then I saw my brother coming down the ladder with an axe. He put the axe on a pile of firewood and met me. "When did you arrive, Alos?" he asked. "I have just arrived," I said. "Do you think Mother is still in Mangusmana?" "I have heard that she has gone to San Manuel with the girls," he said. "They went there to harvest mongo. It is the season, you know." "What about Father?" I asked. "Father went with them," he said. When my brother noticed that I was looking toward the window, he opened the gate and said, "I am married now, and I have a daughter. Come and meet my wife." I did not want to ask him about his political aspirations. He had been deep in politics when I had left Binalonan. I noticed that his wife was big with child again. "We are expecting another," he said in apology. Later, he and I went to our old house. A gambler and his wife had bought it. They were in the yard admiring a gamecock. We stood outside the fence looking into the house, but when the man invited us to play cards, we walked around the fence silently and left. "It is a good house," I said, beginning to feel badly because a professional gambler had bought it. "We were all born in it," my brother said. "We grew up in it too. If I had enough money, I would like to buy it for my children." "I would too," I said. "Remember the window where we used to hang the parrot cage and the beautiful pot that mother brought home with her from one of the villages? I had fun in that house. I guess I will never live in it again." "It is too bad we are all scattered now," he said. "I will come back someday," I said. "I will come back and buy that house. I will buy it and build a high cement wall around it. I will come back with lots of money and put on a new roof. It must be leaking now. I will put new walls too. Wait and see." "I don't have my health anymore, Alos," Luciano said sadly. "If I were you, I would never stop moving until I came back with money. When are you leaving again?" "Tomorrow," I said. "But I would like to go to San Manuel and say goodbye to the family before I leave for Manila. I think I know where to find them. I used to work there with mother, you know." In the morning, I took a caromata for San Manuel. The town had not changed. I went directly to the field where mother and I had worked years before. They were all glad to see me, but when I told them that I was leaving for America, they became sad and silent. Then Francisca unwrapped a bit of cloth where she kept her earnings and put the money in my pocket. "I cannot take your money, Francisca," I said. She looked at me as though she had something important to say. Then she said, "Take it anyway, brother. When you are in America, go to school. And when you come back to Binalonan, teach Marcela and me to read. That is all I want from you. We will be working hard with mother while you are gone." There was a big lump in my throat. A little girl giving me 5 pesos so that I could go to school in America. It was her whole year's savings. I took my father's hand and tried to tell him that it was goodbye. He leaned on his walking stick to keep himself from falling. "Be sure to come back, son," he said weakly. "When you find it hard and there is no other way, you must come back to Binalonan and stay with us." "I will come back, father," I said. My sisters clung to my hands, looking at me with pleading eyes. There was a meadow lark somewhere in the sunlit field. It was singing rapturously. Not far away, a peasant girl was singing a kundiman, or love song, and the young man answered with a song as sweet and innocent. Nearby, a little boy was playing with a quail that he had snared with horsehair and the unharvested mongo field. In a metallic instant, I remembered how Luciano and I had snared birds. I walked on the footpath that led to the driveway. When I reached the gravel road that finally took me to the highway, I looked back at my family for the last time. I saw my mother in bold outline, raising her dark hands. She wept without moving her eyes, without moving her lips. She cried, and in the aching surge of a moment, she put her face in her hands and sobbed loudly between fits of agonized laughter. I went to Binalonan to say goodbye to Luciano. His wife had just given birth to another baby. I knew that he would have a child every year. I knew that in 10 years he would be so burdened with responsibilities that he would want to lie down and die. I was glad that I was free from life. I was glad that I was free from the life he was living. When I had finally settled myself in the bus, I looked down and saw my brother's pitiful eyes. "Don't come back to Binalonan, Alos," he said. "Even if you have to steal and kill, don't come back to this damn town. Don't ever come back, please, little brother." He was running furiously alongside the bus and waving his hands desperately with the importance of what he had to say. "Don't come back as I have done. See what happened to me." He let my hand go and suddenly stopped running. He was crying and shaking as though a strong wind were bending him from side to side. On the train to Manila, I met a tall university student from La Union, where he had spent his vacation. He was going back to the university, but was unhappy at the prospect. He looked at his books contemptuously and glanced quickly out of the window, waving at the peasant girls selling rice cakes and boiled eggs in makeshift stands near the railroad tracks. I saw the engraved name on his leather suitcase, Juan Cablaan. When he noticed my inquisitive eyes, Juan said, "Yes, that is my name. My father is the governor of my province. He is a good lawyer and he wants me to follow his profession. Hell!" He cursed and kicked his suitcase away, looking out of the window and waving at the girls. "But he was very helpful to me," he said. "Don't let the choqueros or drivers cheat you. Don't talk to them in the dialect." When we arrived at the station in Manila, Juan called for a caromata. He instructed the driver to go to a certain address. When we reached the place, we saw many barefoot provincianos at the gate. It was evident that they had just arrived in the city from the provinces. They were carrying homemade suitcases. "These peasants from the provinces are also going to America," Juan said to me, glancing nonchalantly at my rattan suitcase. "How did you know I am going to America?" I asked. He did not answer me. When the caromata stopped in front of the little house, Juan opened his suitcase and offered me a pair of old shoes. "Wear these shoes if you don't want people to know that you are from the provinces and on your way to America," he said. "Some thieves and pickpockets might think that you have money about you. I know you only have a few pesos tied with a cloth belt under your coat." He was right, and I felt embarrassed. "I have no money to pay for the shoes," I said. "Forget it," he said. I entered the gate with the rest of the peasants from the provinces. The house was overflowing with boys, chattering in their dialects and putting away their provisions in the corners of the house. I went to the window and looked out. For nearly a mile around, I saw only nipa houses. We were in Tondo, in the slum district of Manila. Every day there was panguingue, a card game in the house. Some of the peasants were tempted to play and lost. They stayed on in Manila hoping to earn enough money to take them to America, but they never earned enough, so they stayed on and on in the city, and their relatives never heard from them again. There was a cockpit in the neighborhood, and I went to watch. The bettors were outside the rope enclosure shouting their bets. Only the owners of the cocks and the referee were inside. When the betting had been arranged by 3 hawkers who went around, the owners of the fighting cocks stepped out of their corners and met in the center of the ring. They held the gamecocks in their arms, the birds glaring at each other challengingly. The referee came forward with 2 sharp steel spurs and, showing the dangerous sharp blades to the two men, he attached one to the right leg of one bird with a leather strap and the other to the second rooster. When this was done to the satisfaction of both men, the referee wrapped the bases of the spurs with pieces of thick black cloth. The men allowed the birds to peck at each other, instructively and challengingly. They then threw them decisively in the center of the ring. The men and the referee moved back to their corners, watching the cocks intently. The birds flung their full weight against each other, and their weapons interlocked. They fluttered about on the ground. The men ran and picked them up. There was no damage. The birds were unharmed. They turned around swiftly and flung themselves upon each other. The betters screamed at the top of their voices and stamped wildly on the ground. Suddenly, one of the cocks rushed the other, but its opponent was alert to danger, and the first rooster fell to the ground. Then a tragic and pathetic thing happened. The fallen cock had buried its spur in the ground, and the other cock turned around and began attacking it viciously. The crowd screamed shrilly, a fanatical screaming. The free bird attacked the helpless one again and again, trying to bury the sharp steel blade, but the armorless cock evaded it miraculously. Suddenly the earth gave way. The bird freed the spur. Stepping backward, it buried its gaff in the neck of the other. The head fell like a stone to the ground. The victor strutted shakily, raised its bloody head, and crowed. The maddened scream stopped. The maddened screaming stopped. Then something happened. The men suddenly started pushing each other and milling around the enclosure. I ran toward the gate and jumped over the fence. Someone was following me. I looked back, and to my surprise, I saw one kablaan running behind me. "What happened?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. "I come here now and then to see how the slum people live." "I also come here for a good time. It is a good experience. I know another interesting place in this district. I will show it to you." It was evening. I could hear church bells ringing. We walked around a while, and one pointed out interesting antiquities and other relics of the past. When the lights came on in the better districts of Manila, we retraced our steps to Tondo and the slum dwellers. We stopped in front of an inconspicuous nipa house. There was a little red light near the door. I could see the dark figure of a man coming slowly down the ladder. There is something I would like you to see before you leave for America," one said. "Have you ever been with a girl?" Not fully comprehending what he meant, I followed him quietly into the dark house. A woman stopped us at the door. Juan touched me. "Do you see her?" he whispered. I peered through the door and saw a young girl on the bamboo floor with a naked man. "What are they doing there?" I asked. "The girl is a prostitute," he said, "and this old witch is her mother. Do you want to try it?" I groped my way to the ladder and ran to the street, glad to feel the fresh air. One was walking rapidly beside me. "There are many girls like her in Manila," he said sadly. "They come from the provinces hoping to find work in the city. But look where they have landed." He laughed bitterly. I began to run furiously away from him. When I reached my boarding house, the men looked at me. I put my arms around the post and tried to ease the wild beating of my heart. I wanted to cry. Suddenly, I started beating the post with my fists. In the morning, a big truck came to take us to the government detention station. We carried our bundles and suitcases and waited in a wide room. After a while, a doctor came and tapped on our chests. Then we were taken to our boat. The people began throwing confetti, and suddenly it began to rain. The boat moved slowly out of the harbor, threading the sharp tongue of the land that led out into the open sea. I stood on the deck and watched the fading shores of Manila. Long afterward, I found myself standing in the heavy rain, holding my rattan suitcase and looking toward the disappearing Philippines. I knew that I was going away from everything I had loved and known. I knew that if I ever returned the first sight of that horizon, I knew that if I ever returned, the first sight of that horizon would be the most beautiful sight in the world. I waved my hat and went into the vestibule that led to the filthy hold below where the other steerage passengers were waiting for me.